Good evening and welcome. The meeting of the Merrimack School Board is hereby called to order at 7:30 this Tuesday, the 20th of February. Would everyone please rise and join the board in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. At this time, I'll entertain a motion for approval of the minutes dated February 5th, 2007. Made by Jennifer, second by Jody. Are there any corrections or clarification to said minutes? Jody?
To start with page 5 of 12. I believe we need a clarification on the very first sentence at the top of the paragraph. There were many additions since the buildings will be maintaining oil heat. I remember the discussion pertaining to the oil preheaters as being an additional item, but I don't remember any other additions specific to removing the gas conversion from the proposal.
Okay, I remember that also as being a singular item. Is there any other board member that has a different recollection? Jody, would it suit your purpose then to augment it to read something to the effect of one addition since the building will be maintaining oil heat would be to insert
that would be accurate to my recollection, okay. Yes.
Any other comment from the board on pertaining to that? Okay. Next.
On page 9 of 12, under number 9, 1, 2, 3, fourth paragraph down, third sentence, it would be necessary to carry liability. The word insurance, I believe, needs to be added in there for clarification.
Okay, thank you.
On page 10 of 12, under comments, the comments that were specific to myself, under board member Valancourt had 3 points to discuss. I'd like to just present some clarification because I felt that the way this was quoted wasn't necessarily an accurate reflection of what the point that I was trying to make and what I stated that night. The second, let's see, the first paragraph, the third sentence, under for example, I'd like it to read something to the effect of the suggestion by a parent that the financial support from booster clubs would not be needed if an athletic fee was enacted was never presented by the school board. This was misinformation. And the last sentence, I believe I said something along the line, she invited the public to contact her if clarification on the issue was needed. Second paragraph, board member Valancourt also expressed her concerns regarding the proposed budget cuts by the budget committee that were made without factual information to support them, as well as the statement that was made that the school board was not looking out for the best interests of students. She noted that the majority of the cuts to teaching staff are due to decreasing enrollments. She stated that there were no cuts to staff at the high school and that the advanced placement courses have not been eliminated. Next paragraph, board member Valancourt saw a town council member being interviewed on television stating that the school board is claiming to have cut $500,000 from the budget when in fact the board's proposed budget was higher than last year. She doesn't remember any school board member stating this. She asked that the public please contact the school board with any questions or needed clarifications.
Jody, if I might back up just to the second paragraph under comments, the last sentence, she stated that there were no staff cuts at the high school. I would further recommend cuts to teaching staff at the high school.
Yes, that would
because
be more
there were
accurate,
positions
yes.
that were cut.
Thank you.
Further comment or discussion on the points raised? Seeing none, are there any further comments or clarifications? Rose?
On page 10 of 12, on the second paragraph, it says Chair Robertson Smith. If you just change that to Vice Chair.
Very good. George?
Was Was Jody's original correction to page 5, was that the first sentence? There were many additions since the buildings will be maintaining oil heat. Was that the sentence
Yes.
you were correcting? Were they talking about the additions to the schools in that sentence?
I don't see it as that context. It's causal on completing.
Can we check that before we alter the minutes to reflect the new?
Sure.
Thank you.
Jody?
On the last page, 11 of 12, under committee reports, fourth paragraph down, third sentence, the discussions dealt with an amendment that would address the statement. And then the fifth paragraph down, the last sentence, discussing the budget hearing to be held on Tuesday, that was February 13th, with March 7th, 2007 being the deliberative session.
Okay. To that point, though, they did reconvene on February 6th. The budget hearing would be held on February 13th, and then it should read that the deliberative session will be held on March 7th.
Right, correct. Thank you.
Rose?
I think I have one other clarification. On page 11 of 12, in the second paragraph, the second sentence from the bottom of that, it says, she explained that this was a proactive step towards the new legislature of a bill changing. That should be legislation of a bill instead of legislature. Would you agree with that? Okay.
Further corrections or clarification? For a point of consistency, on page 10 of 12, CD is referred to as a cassette disc. Is it not a computer disc instead of a cassette? Am I off base there, but doesn't the acronym stand for computer? If we could have the record just clarify that. Compact disc. Compact. Thank you. Any further clarifications or corrections? Seeing none, we'll put the question to a vote. All those in favor of approving the minutes as amended, so signify by saying aye. Aye. Motion carries 5-0-0. At this point, we'll open the meeting up to public participation. This is an opportunity for members of the public to raise issues, provide information, or state personal positions for the record. We ask that when approaching the microphone, you state your name, address, and any group you represent this evening, while adhering to the written guidelines that appear on the back of tonight's agenda. Seeing no public participation, we will close it at this time. At this point, I would like to have a motion to accept a gift or grant under $5,000 by an anonymous donor. So made by George, second by Jennifer. Matt, would you please speak to this?
Well, tonight we have the pleasure of accepting a anonymous donation of $2,000 for the Mastrocola Upper Elementary School Lego League. The anonymous donor would like this to be directed towards the purchase of new sets of Lego robotic systems and any supporting materials or equipment required for them. So we're very appreciative of this, and we have this before you for your consideration tonight.
Thank you, Matt. Is there any comment or discussion concerning the anonymous donation? Jody?
I'd just like to take this opportunity to thank the donor.
Certainly. And on behalf of the board, I think it's always really refreshing for us and a wonderful opportunity to thank the members of the public who consider the school district when they give charitably, and particularly to a specific program that is something that they feel most passionate about. So to the donor, again, thank you. Okay. At this point, we'll put the question to a vote. All those in favor of accepting the $2,000 anonymous donation to the Mastrocola Upper Elementary School Lego League, so signify by saying aye. Aye. Motion carries 5-0-0. Okay. At this time, I'd like to request a motion to approve the consent agenda as submitted. Made by Jennifer, second by Jody. Debbie, would you speak to the consent agenda this evening?
We have a letter of resignation from Mr. Richard McKenzie, a special educator at Merrimack Middle School.
Also on the consent agenda, we have approval of the Youth Risk Behavior Survey, which was presented to us at our last meeting. Is there any discussion from the board? Seeing none, we'll put the question to a vote. All those in favor of approving the consent agenda as submitted, so signify by saying aye. Aye. Motion carries 5-0-0. At this point in our agenda, we will welcome the school district moderator, Carolyn Whitlock, to the table in preparation for the deliberative session, which again will take place for the school district on March 7th this year. Carolyn, welcome.
It's a pleasure to be here for my once-a-year visit. I'm pleased to say that plans are well underway for our annual school district meeting coming up in just a couple of weeks, where I'm told that we're expecting a good-sized crowd this year, and that's always a good thing to see people participating in government. As it stands right now, we're still looking for assistant moderators. I'm still looking for assistant moderators. That's one of my jobs. And we will have, I'm planning on 6 assistant moderators this year, which is quite a lot more than usual, but I'm told that the crowd is expected to be bigger than usual. Also, I'm planning on having 4 ballot inspectors to check people in at the door so that the lines don't get frustratingly long in case we do have the turnout that we expect may be coming. This year, as I usually do, I attended the moderators training sponsored by the New Hampshire Municipal Association and the local government center. And for those of you on the board who are new, you may not realize that there is training every year for the moderators. Some of these moderators, of course, have been doing the job for 20, 25, 30 years, but other people are fairly new on the job. They put out a booklet every year. This is the 2007 edition of the Town Meeting and School Meeting Handbook, and you'd be surprised that I do get calls, especially around this time of year, from people who are planning on participating in the meeting, but they want to have a little education about how things go, and call and ask me, and it's a wonderful reference manual. I suspect there is one of these in the superintendent's office. If there is not, they are for sale by the local government center, and I'm sure you could get one very easily. By the way, the school district moderators and the town moderators go by the same rules for the most part. A couple of other things that came up this year at the moderators training that I'm going to put into action this year that I haven't done before, and that is that I'm going to make an announcement along with my regular rules that I've been doing. And by the way, if any of you would like copies of those rules, I'd be happy to email them to you. I have had some requests for those from people this year as well. We always have the possibility that there will be a petition for a secret ballot on any of the warrant articles, and this year I'm going to go prepared with such a petition, if you will, with correct language on it that people can take and get their 5 signatures that are required for the for the secret ballot, it doesn't mean that that form has to be used. It will be there for the convenience of those who want it. Along with that, I will be requiring that all of the petitioners be in the room at the time we take the vote, and they will all be introduced so everyone will know who the people are who are asking for the secret ballot. I do have a question for you folks that you may or may not want to answer, or you may or may not know the answer. You don't need to answer it tonight, just let me know if you know something, please. And that is, some towns designate a separate section in the meeting room for people who are not registered voters. And of course, they're the top of the bleachers, if you will. They're not the prime seats on the floor. And from time to time, we do get remarks from people that just commenting on their feeling is that the room is stacked with people who aren't registered to vote in town, or teachers who don't live in town. I don't know if it's a contract year or not. I don't think it is it? So that probably won't be an issue this year. But as crowds begin to build, that may be something that I have to give some attention to in the future. But if I don't hear anything from anyone saying that they think there might be a possibility for a lot of people to be there who aren't registered voters, then I won't do anything about it. But if I do hear, then of course I will give it some consideration. We've never had to be concerned about unruly children in the room. Courtesy prevails. We'll ask everyone to respect the rights of others and not have unruly children or cell phone conversations and all of that things that are usually in the room. I think that covers just about everything. Do any of you have any questions for me at this point?
Thank you, Carolyn. Are there any questions or discussion to come with Carolyn's presentation? Jennifer?
Being the rookie,
Yeah.
could you send me a copy of the rules
I'd
just
be
so that I
happy
have
to.
a chance to review them?
No
before?
problem
Thank you.
whatsoever.
Thank you.
Okay, yep. I'll send them out to all of you just so that you'll all have them, so everyone will have the same information then. Glad to.
Okay. Other questions for Carolyn? Jody?
I'm not sure when we were going to discuss this, Emily, but my questions pertain to the school board's role in presenting the items that are going to be on the warrant and how that operates, if there's rules of protocol on who speaks, and I believe we have to wait to be called on by the moderator to speak. If we could just go over that. Is that a good time for that question
We
now?
can do that
or
later
are we
in
gonna move
our
on to that?
in review of the school district warrant. We're going to, talk about who will present each piece. But Carolyn, I think it would certainly be appropriate just to not only for the board members, but for the audience at home to get a better sense of how we
Yes.
proceed. And
The way that is done is you, in your meeting, will hash out who's going to make what motion and who's going to second it. Now, sometimes someone from the audience gets the second up there before one of you gets a chance to second it. But I will have that information, and you will know by then just who is going to do that. And then I always extend the courtesy to the person who makes the motion to be the first one to speak to the motion. So that is all orchestrated, and it just makes the meeting run that much more efficiently. Now, in the case of a petitioned warrant article, and I understand that you do have a petitioned warrant article of this year, I will call upon the person who wishes to make the motion, I'm sorry, and I don't know who that person is. That's one reason why I'm stumbling a little here. But I have been told there is someone who would like to make a motion, and instead of my reading that motion from the warrant, my plan is to let the person read the motion or say the motion as he or she would like to have it officially in the record. So if you have, and I imagine you have all been distributed a copy of the intended motion, that the person making the motion can change the motion. They can change the intent of the motion. They can't change the subject matter. So the motion can be changed from what you have been given ahead of time as it's on the floor. It doesn't have to be amended. However it comes through when the person makes the motion is how we're going to handle it. The one thing I would request is that the person who makes the motion have, if they're going to amend it, to have that written out and given to me before the motion is made. It'll just make things flow more smoothly and just make it easier for everyone.
Are there questions or comments? If I may, Carolyn,
Certainly.
You spoke to the non-registered voters perhaps needing a space in the audience. I've been contacted or know of some people who have always been frustrated by having a spouse who is a non-resident to the United States and therefore not able to vote.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a possibility, or are those family members who are not registered voters, while they can't vote at deliberative session, are they allowed to speak?
Probably not, especially if there are a lot of people there and there's a long line and so forth. If they're not registered to vote, then they cannot speak.
Okay. Other questions or comments for Carolyn?
But that is an interesting question in the case of, and I remember that happening years ago where there was a big advocate for something to do with the schools, but they were Native Canadians and they couldn't vote, and it was very frustrating for them. But of course, they can sit with their family and so forth. I certainly don't want to leave anyone with the impression that we're going to isolate non-voters from their families. That's not true at all.
Okay. Well, we will then take under consideration, as you mentioned, the special seating or area for non-registered voters, but knowing too that they wouldn't be segregated from their families or their spouses.
We try to let common sense prevail. And in fact, everything that's not an RSA that is advisory in this book is just that. It's advisory. Let common sense prevail, and things usually run pretty smoothly. I'm pleased to say that since I've been school district moderator, I think we've had very, very smooth meetings. And certainly we did before. I don't mean to be implying that moderators before me weren't doing it, but I've just been impressed with the courtesy from all factions that are in the room on a night that is potentially volatile. People are showing a lot of respect for each other, and I expect that'll happen again this year.
I'm certain it will. Other questions for Carolyn? Seeing none, thank you for your presentation this evening.
And I will all see you all on the 7th.
On March 7th, and we do have a holdover date in case of snow or need to carry over to a second night of March 8th. So we'll need to keep both of those dates free on our calendars this year. Thank you. Thank you.
Nice to see you all.
Okay, at this point in our agenda, we will call to the table the petitioners of the warrant article that Carolyn just alluded to. They are Patty Karansky, Dana Bergen, and Louise Caceres. The presentation regarding the petition warrant article for restoration, come on up, restoration of the assistant principal at James Mastercole Elementary School was taken under consideration by the Budget Committee at their last meeting, the public hearing on the 13th, at which time these three ladies spoke to their petition warrant, and will do the same this evening. Welcome.
You want our names, where we live? Okay.
My name is Dana Bergen, and I live at 1 Holly Lane. I guess I'll just start with saying I have over 100 reasons, and I actually took the time and wrote 100 reasons why I think my school needs an assistant principal. And I would also think that in this room, you also probably could come up with 100 reasons why our school needs an assistant principal. And while I understand that there's a budget crunch, and while I understand that we have less students, I still feel we need an assistant principal. I'll give you my 3 reasons. My first reason is because 2 is always better than 1. I manage a DI team, and I rely on all of my parents because I do it on my own. But without all of my parents, I wouldn't be able to do it on my own. My other reason is I look at my school last year and I look at my school this year, and I don't see that much difference. And I would ask the question of, if we needed them last year, we need one this year. And the last piece is really more or less in my own opinion. But there's 400 kids that'll be in that school next year, and they won't get to know him the way that my son has come to know him, the way that my son has come to appreciate him, respect him, and understand him. And I feel like the perspective of what we're going to be able to offer is not a bad education. It's not a, improper education. It's not an inappropriate education. It's just not the best that I think we can do. I think we as a town, Merrimack, New Hampshire, can give a better education than what one administrator would give. And with that, I'll let these other ladies speak.
Okay, thank you, Dana.
Good evening, Mrs. Chairman, members of the board, and district administrators. For the record, my name is Louise Caceres, and I live at 11 Windsor Drive. Thank you for allowing me and these other 2 ladies the opportunity to share our thoughts in addressing this topic. Thank you also for assuming the difficult tasks you, the Budget Committee members, and others involved have had to endure throughout this process. While I highly respect that work and certainly don't envy what you've had to do, I am strongly opposed to the elimination of the assistant principal's position at Mastrocola Elementary. As it stands now, Mr. Fabrizio will have to assume the responsibility of both principal and assistant principal during the next school year. I have a child both in 1st grade and in 2nd grade, and have had the pleasure of becoming a very involved volunteer at the school. As a member of the PAT board, and again a regular volunteer at the school, I can already see how difficult it's going to be, not only for the administration, but the student body, staff, and parents, by not having this assistant principal in that building. I know that Mr. Fabrizio is willing to take on this challenge, but his availability for various tasks will be greatly diminished by being both the internal and external go-to person at the school. For things like what about all the behind-the-scene duties, such as staff evaluations? Mr. Fabrizio will now have to be responsible for 100% of those. I understand that there are thoughts of sharing the assistant principals from the other elementary schools, but I'm afraid that loyalties will lie elsewhere, and that the inconsistencies by having different people playing the same role will be too great for such a sensitive age group. The students need to see the same person on a daily basis in a variety of roles, whether it's in costume for an assembly or a very serious disciplinarian. The school's mantra is safety, respect, and responsibility. If this position is eliminated, we just might be creating an unsafe, disrespectful, and irresponsible environment by way of example. The assistant principal must wear so many different hats, and I'm concerned that something, even the very important things, will be compromised. We have a moral and civic duty to the children in this community to service them well, and part of that is giving them a great and well-rounded education with continuity. I greatly support the reinstatement of the assistant principal's position at Mastrocola Elementary, and I kindly request that you give this serious reconsideration. Thank you for your time this evening.
Thank you, Louise.
My name is Patty Koriansky, and I live at 47 Jessica Drive. Good evening, board members, Mrs. Chaffrey, and everybody here this evening. Thank you very much for allowing me to speak this evening. I would like to address the petition warrant article for reinstating the assistant principal position. I have been a volunteer at Mastrocola Elementary School for the past 5.5 years. During that time, I have volunteered in many areas of the school. I was also the volunteer coordinator in 2004 to 2005, and I am currently the Parent and Teachers Together organization president. I strongly oppose the elimination of the assistant principal position at Mastrocola Elementary School. I would like to point out a few things this evening. I requested from Mastrocola Elementary School current principal Mrs. Custer's office the projected enrollment numbers for this school year and the projected enrollment numbers for the 2007-2008 school year. I would like to share that information with you this evening. For 2006-2007, the projected numbers of students was 402. The actual enrollment is 417 as of this date. That is up 15 students from the projected number. For the 2007-2008, the projected number of students is 403. That is 1 student more than the projection from last year. How can this position be taken away knowing that in the past it was required and necessary? This projection shows that there will be more students next year than was projected for this year. In the 5.5 years that I've lived in Merrimack, I have not heard publicly addressed any reason for eliminating the assistant principal position. So why eliminate the position now? It has always been necessary and required in the past 5.5 years that I've lived here. It is impossible to determine the exact number of students that will be entering the 2007-2008 school year at JMES at this time. If you go by what was projected last year for this school year, that number of 402 is up by 15 students. By eliminating the assistant principal position, you will not be giving the students, parents, and the staff at Mastrocola Elementary School the same opportunities that the other 2 schools have. The opportunities meaning time the assistant principal has with the children to discuss problems, discipline issues, and educational issues. What about the parents' concerns regarding their children? Having the time to sit with the assistant principal to discuss their concerns about their children. The staff also needs time with the assistant principal to discuss and get guidance regarding the students and their classes. How will this be possible with only a principal? Mr. Fabrizio, who I have the utmost respect for, will have to deal with all of these issues, being a principal and an assistant principal. Currently, Mr. Fabrizio addresses these issues and spends the time with the student, staff, and parents. He does an outstanding job. Next year, he will have the additional responsibilities of being principal also. What happens when he is out or dealing with his principal responsibilities? Why should our children have to wait or not be able to have ample time to address their issues because the position was eliminated? Yes, there will be 1 less person at JMES supervising the students and the staff with the elimination of the assistant principal position. I ask that you please reconsider and take a good look at the ramifications for eliminating the assistant principal position at JMES. Would you want your child, niece, nephew, or grandchild attending Mastrocola Elementary School with only 1 administrator? I know I don't. I do know that if my child has an issue or a problem, that he deserves the same amount of time with the assistant principal as the other schools do. Thank you for allowing me to speak with you this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Patty. Certainly.
Just because we were at the budget committee, there was a timing issue with the signatures and whatnot. Do we know that they've all been verified and that it is in check with what it needs to be?
That. Marge, do you happen to know?
I think what would be good to do, Dana, is to just make contact with the school district clerk, Pat Heinrich, but I'm going to make the assumption, because we've heard nothing, that they have been verified, but she would be able to tell you directly.
May I address one more issue?
Certainly.
We are aware that the amount of the assistant principal position is incorrect, and we will be addressing that at the deliberative session also.
Okay. While these 3 ladies are here before us, is there any comment or question to come from the board regarding this petition warrant article? Jody?
My question was going to be to what Patty just spoke to, was the dollar amount, because I knew for salary and benefits for an incoming vice principal was quite high. Matt, could you put a more accurate dollar amount to mind for that position for us?
Yeah, let me just kind of clarify how that number came about. That really is the number for the retiring principal, the delta between what the assistant and the principal make now versus what the new principal is going to make next year. So it was in the budget book. It was a figure that was named as a reduction, but it's not the true cost of an assistant principal. The true cost of an assistant principal, looking at past history and taking into account perhaps a family plan on the health insurance, on the dental insurance, FICA, Medicare, New Hampshire retirement, probably would be around $98,000. Mm-hmm.
Other questions or comments? George?
Would that include some of the costs that are incurred by the district for like extra training or things like that we normally will fund a portion of? When you take that number 98,000, I mean, I know we do have stipends for advanced courses or travel, that a lot of these administrators will do quite a bit of travel. I've noticed some travel expenses. So it's a hard number to put an exact figure on. So it could be closer to this 124 number if you calculate in some of those other things that are involved with having an employee.
Well, if you're looking just specifically at administrator improvement, perhaps travel, I think probably the top you would probably get would be maybe like 101,000, maybe 102 maximum. I couldn't see it ever approaching the 124 figure here. So I think 98 is probably a pretty good bet. If you get somebody perhaps that has a two-family plan as opposed to a two-person plan versus a family plan, there'd be some savings there. But I think we could probably work with the $98,000 figure and accommodate all the staff development and training that needs to be done with the new individual.
And George, just to note, the professional administrative staff isn't bound by the same teacher's contract. I mean, their contract has extra stipends, so there's no set line like for pay for performance or for graduate course studies or the professional development as a block like you see with the teaching or support staff. So I would agree with Matt, too, that we wouldn't see anywhere near $27,000 in staff development or travel expenses for any of these administrators.
Oh, and I agree. But I'm saying that the number of 98 could be difference by $7,000 to $10,000 difference there.
I'd still think that would be really high. I'd say more in line. I mean, even when we look in the manifest at travel.
Well, I'd like to err on the side of caution. That number seems more realistic to me. Recalling some of the contractual agreements that Rose and I worked on when we did the administrative staff end of the contract, there was, some things in there, and then seeing some of the things in the manifest like travel and stuff that the public do not see usually, that we pay for generally annually per employee. I still don't recall seeing any outrageous travel claims. I mean, in the years that I've been here, I don't remember anyone sticking out as repeatedly traveling. I'm not saying they're outrageous. My point is that the numbers, you'd really have to take it by a case study and take that administrator, that person's salary for the year, and then add in all the additional things that we do, or they might require. And I would think that could be a difference of $5,000 to $7,000.
Point taken. I would believe too, though, that $2,000 to $3,000 would probably be more in line. Matt, you're nodding, or Marge?
I think what I would say is, in this particular case, George, because we would be talking probably about a brand new person, I don't think that there would be that kind of thing. When Matt and I conferred about this, I think we looked at every possibility, and that's why we thought that was a pretty accurate number, especially for a first year of someone coming to the district or being in that position.
Okay, George, you're all set? Are there other questions for the three petitioners before us this evening? Okay, we will take this under advisement. We do need to make a recommendation, but we'll do that in the next segment of our agenda as we look through the district warrant. Ladies, thank you for your time and your efforts for our children at Mastrocola. Okay, in our packets, we do have a compilation of the school district warrant for the March 7th deliberation and April 10th voting sessions. The items that we need to address this evening have been highlighted in yellow, but as you'll see, there's some legalese at the beginning of the document that outlines the times and locations for voting. Article 1 will be the election of necessary school district officers, and that will be on the ballot vote. Article 2, shall the Merrimack School Board be authorized to accept on behalf of the district without further action by the voters gifts, legacies, and devices of personal or real property which may become available to the school district during the fiscal year. A majority vote is required on this. This warrant article, we just had a prime example this evening of the $2,000 donation that was anonymously given to Jay Muse for the Lego team. This is a great example of why we are desirous of having the school board have that authorization. Is there any discussion that comes before the board based on Article 2 this evening? Jennifer?
This may be whatever. What would happen if this vote fails? Just for the viewers' knowledge, what would happen if this does not pass?
Matt, what would the standing be?
You could still accept gifts of cash, because this doesn't talk to cash, to money. But you could not accept, if somebody wanted to give you a parcel of land, you couldn't accept it. Somebody wanted to give you some sort of endowment of, let's say, a new building or something like that, you couldn't accept it. So it's really for real, hard, tangible property. Cash is covered on a warrant article that the district adopted probably 10, 15 years ago, which is a boilerplate article that you don't have to do every year. This is just for real, tangible property.
So if this didn't pass and somebody wanted to donate property, they could not, by law, donate to the school district?
School district couldn't accept it without going perhaps for a special meeting and having a warrant article and having people vote on it. That's correct.
Thank you.
Okay. Is there any further comment or discussion on this warrant article? Actually, could I have a motion to accept the article as written? Made by Jennifer, second by Rose. Further discussion or comment? Seeing none, we'll put the question to the vote. All those in favor of submitting Article 2 as written, so signify by saying aye. Aye. Motion carries 5-0-0. The next series of warrant articles we have already dealt with in public meeting. Article 3 dealt with appropriating $50,000 for the purposes of a roof reconstruction capital reserve fund. Article 4 similarly put forth an article to establish $50,000 or 20% of the unencumbered surplus for a pavement reconstruction capital reserve. On the next page, Article 5 deals with the district raising $150,000 for the purpose of executing the first phase of asbestos abatement at the Merrimack High School. And Article 6 similarly dealt with capital reserve fund for the purpose of asbestos abatement in the district to appropriate $50,000 or again 20% of the unencumbered surplus. Article 7 dealt with the Honeywell issue. Shall the district vote to authorize the school board to enter into the 12-year lease agreement for the purpose of energy efficiency and building infrastructure upgrades? And those have all been voted and recorded here by the school board. Article 8 is an article that we need to discuss this evening. The petitioners that just came before us have spoken to it. Could I have a motion to approve Article 8 as petitioned? Made by Rose, second by Jody. Is there further comment or discussion from the board based on this warrant article as petitioned to reinstate the assistant principal at James Mastrocola Elementary School? George?
Two quick things. The board was pretty unanimous in voting to remove that from the budget. Also, it looks like the budget committee was in favor of doing that. My next point would be simply to enrollment numbers. The data that I recall is that our enrollment numbers will be declining, not increasing. So I think those two things will support the removal of this position.
Further comment or discussion? Jody?
I just wanted to state that this decision was not an easy one for me personally. I don't think it was for anybody else on the board. I took this, I gave it a lot of thought about it quite a bit before I made my decision to support eliminating the position. We did talk a lot about enrollment numbers. We've also talked about the fact that enrollment numbers aren't necessarily always going to be accurate. I think for the next year or two, we've got a pretty good handle, though, on what the enrollment's going to be at that school. Patty had cited 403 projection next year. I remember the number 397, pretty close. It could go up by a few, but I do believe that we are well under the $500 mark that is basically requiring you to have an administrative assistant. Is it the ideal situation for this school? Maybe it's not. I think you're going to have a difference of opinions on that. But due to enrollments, and I'm not saying that a year or two from now things couldn't change as far as enrollment, situations couldn't change at the school, that we might possibly need to reconsider adding in that position. But I am saying for next year, with the information that I have, with the budget constraints that I have been presented with as a school board member, that I would not be in favor of supporting this petition warrant article, and that's my reason. I've also wanted to add that administration has made it clear that they will do everything in their power to see to it that Mr. Fabrizio is successful in his role as a single administrator. He has a lot of support, he has a lot of backup, although that may not be enough to make some people comfortable with the decision. I have faith in administration and that they'll make Mr. Fabrizio as successful as he possibly can be with all the support that he needs, as I have been told that they will do. Thank you.
Thank you, Jody. Rose?
The process of any of the cuts that we made, out of all of the cuts that came before the board, I know in addition to the discussion that went on during the public budget sessions, where we had an opportunity to speak with the administrators and question and follow through with our concerns and either put things back into the budget or decide that this was an area that we would have to make a change in. And I know for myself, and I know some other school board members as well, in addition to taking just the information that they had available that night, there were numerous discussions with administrators, with the team about, what could we really foresee happening, and how could we make this happen, because it is a big change and it is of concern. And one of the pieces that has guided our decision-making process is our district logic model. And certainly some of the things that I have heard through either emails or, for example, tonight, the 3 members that came forward that actually petitioned the warrant article were concerns that had to do with safety and the code of conduct that we would like to see in all of our schools. And all of those things are a piece of our district logic model, which is something that we have, as a board, have all agreed on and put into policy. And a lot of our, actually all of our decision making has been based on, can we make this decision and how does it fit into the district logic model as we look at everything as we go through the process. And it is considered, in my opinion, data-driven decision making. And as we went through the process and we looked at other areas that were either suggested by constituents as areas to look at to cut, or even offered up as the administration, that what was asked of them to bring a budget forward, none of this is ideal, but it was based on data-driven decision making. And in some cases, actually in all cases, you look at a position and why was this picked over this? Well, a lot of it does have to do with justifying a position based on data. And earlier, Jody spoke of the 500 student count, which is one of the state guidelines that we follow. And in other areas, we also justify positions based on these same guidelines. This does not mean we're only trying to do minimum. We will do better than minimum, and I can guarantee that, because we did speak with the administrative team, and they are a team that work together for the good of all and for the good of this district, especially people who are very involved as volunteers and in the school. We do have a team of folks on board in all areas of leadership, just not in the role of principal and assistant principal, but many other areas of leadership who will make this work. And you know what? We can always go back and reevaluate. But I will stand by the decisions that we did make earlier, and that will be my position on this warrant article.
Thank you, Rose. Further comments or discussion? If I can add too, one of the pieces that we really have worked hard to pay attention to is the sentiment in town. And what people may or may not realize is this is truly the 4th year of our budget cutting, or our reductions below a levelly serviced budget. This year we have come in significantly below the default, to the point that I'm not comfortable making any further reductions or any further movement. I think that the administrative team worked very, very hard to put together a budget that met the needs of the community, and in discussion of the assistant principal at Master Cole Elementary School, this hasn't been the first time that it's been under discussion. And to address the declining enrollment, that is why that building is targeted, because that is the smallest of the buildings. That said, my son is a student at that building, and I am concerned for the safety of the children or for the procedures as it goes on, but I would never have voted in support of the removal of this position if I believed that at any time it would jeopardize any of the students in the building or affect the programs, or, as Rose alluded to, the district logic model and the goals that we've set. So for those reasons, I do not support the reinstatement of the petitioned warrant article to put the assistant principal back at James Master Cole Elementary School. Further comment or discussion? Seeing none. All those in favor of recommending the petitioned warrant article to reinstate or restore the assistant principal's position at Master Cole Elementary School, so signify by saying aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Recommendation fails, 0-5-0. The last article we have discussed before, but I'd like to bring it to the table once more for reconsideration by the board. The article that we voted on had a budget line of roughly $259,000 more in the budget. As it reads currently, it is the Budget Committee's language. Shall the district raise and appropriate as an operating budget, not including appropriations by special warrant articles and other appropriations voted separately, the amount set forth on the budget posted with the warrant, excuse me, or as amended by vote, excuse me, vote of the first session for the purposes set forth therein, totaling $59,105,269. Should this article be defeated, the operating budget shall be $85,208, which is the same as last year, with certain adjustments required by previous action of the district or by law, or the governing body may hold one special meeting in accordance with RSA 40:13, Roman numerals 10 and 14, to take up the issue of a revised operating budget only. A majority vote would be required. Could I have a motion to approve or to recommend the approval of Article 9 as written? Made by George, second by Rose. If I could speak to this, in the last Budget Committee meeting, adjustments were made. Roughly $159,000 was readjusted in the way that the district would go about the hiring of teachers for replacing retired teachers, and that was based on a calculation that, when we went through the discussions, had been done last year, and the district administration chose not to do it this year as a most prudent way to expend or allocate the resources. The second piece that was altered was that the line item for, Matt, help me out, the fund balance was changed from 2 million to 2.1 million, meaning that we would anticipate an additional $100,000 to the fund balance, which would be the surplus for this year. Am I correct?
Yes.
Thank you. Both of those practices are not ones that the board had supported or discussed any further as potential considerations. While there are pieces that we certainly could have brought up, we did not, for whatever reason it may be. Is there any discussion or questions or clarification that needs to come from the board? Jody?
I just wanted to state that while I understand the reasonings for both proposals and adding the money on to the fund balance possibly will be okay to do, I do have concerns regarding the decrease in the dollar amount that is due to retirements, anticipated retirements. And I just would like to state that I'm just afraid that we possibly could be tying our hands as a district when we go out looking for replacements as needed for these retiring staff members. I'm assuming that this number that had this cut came about with the assumption that we would be replacing the retirees with people with little or no experience. Is that where that number came from, Marge?
I think it probably is a number that we can arrive at based on what's happened over time. Past boards have been very good to the administration to let them look at the particular position and make a determination as to what needs to be done. In other words, if it's a specialty position, then more than likely we're going to have to hire someone that is more experienced. But in some cases, we are able to hire someone who is just coming from college. So we've had the latitude to look at the position and make a determination. We feel that we'll still be able to find high-quality people having made this change.
That basically speaks to my concern. I'm concerned that we're going to be tying our hands, that we're not going to be able to have the latitude to pursue high-quality people should we not have the money available for the appropriate salary. And that's my concern with this. Hopefully it will work out, but to me it's not a no-brainer as some people have called it. I think you're taking a gamble, and it could either work in your favor or it could work against you, and I would just like my concerns just noted for the public is all. Thank you.
Well, I think too, Jody, just the notion that it was a practice that we tried last year and that it was not recommended to continue or to sustain into this year. As I've said repeatedly, I think that when we look at the budget, it's as important to see what the administrative staff left in the budget as being very, very important to them versus what was removed from the budget. And this, again, would be another example of that. Further discussion or comment? Okay, seeing none. All those in favor of recommending Article 9 as written, so signify by saying aye. Aye. Motion carries 5-0-0. Okay, at this time, we do have a chart that was created in our packets to help us, as Jody referred to when Carolyn was at the table, kind of flesh out what we need to do on the night of deliberative session. And it'll just make our evening go that much more smoothly if we understand, number one, what each of the board members will be responsible for and does have a certain amount of knowledge or information on hand should questions be asked. The first article to come before us is the one that we just approved recommendation of for gifts and property. Would anyone like to move that at this time? Rose? And a board member to second that? George? Article 3 is for the Roof Capital Reserve Fund. Is there a board member who would be responsible for moving and presenting? Jody? And a second, Rose. For the Pavement Capital Reserve Fund, I'll take that one. And a second, Jody. Recommendation for the asbestos abatement at the high school, Phase 1. George? And a second. Jennifer? For the asbestos abatement capital reserve fund, Rose? And a second. Jennifer? And energy efficiency updates? George, you'll take that one? That would be great. And Jennifer, or Rose, would you mind if Jennifer took the asbestos abatement?
That's fine. Yeah. Thank you.
And Rose, would you do the second on Article 6?
Yes, I will.
And Jody, you will second Article 7. Okay. So I have for gifts and property, moved by Rose, seconded by George. Roof Capital Reserve Fund, moved by Jody, seconded by Rose. Pavement Capital Reserve Fund, Emily, with a second by Jody. The high school asbestos abatement, Phase 1, George, with a second by Jennifer. Which one?
Number 5.
George, do you mind if Rose does that one?
Yes,
For number 5?
No. Okay. That'll be, those are both kind of big ones, too.
5 and 7 will...
No, that's fine. No, that'd be 6. There it is, Jen.
I'll just sit there.
Okay, then Article 5, Rose will put the motion forward, Jennifer will second. Asbestos abatement, Jennifer will make the motion, Rose will second. Energy efficiency upgrades, George will make that motion, and Jody will speak to the second. For Article number 8, restoring the assistant principal position, that is done by the petitioners. They will speak at the microphone at the appropriate time. And Article 9, the operating budget, is done by the Budget Committee. Other questions or clarification? Thank you for making that painless. The next item on our agenda is presentation of Gateway Guidelines. We will be joined at the table by Sharon Putney, Rick Glatz. Did I not see Rick? I don't see Rick. Okay. By Sharon Putney, Dennis Pym, Barbara DeVore, and Cynthia Cronin, Gateway teachers for the district. And Debbie, as they assemble themselves, will you give a precursor here?
Be glad to. The Gateway team has met with us before. They have met with the PERC committee for the district and the leadership team, and they're here this evening to tell you about the culmination of the work that they've done over the past couple of years on the Gateway curriculum for the Merrimack School District.
Thank you, Debbie. Welcome all.
Good evening. On behalf of the team, we're thrilled to be back and saying we've completed our mission after probably hundreds of hours of work. I'm Barbara DeVore. I'm the Gateway person at Reed's Ferry 2/3 of the time, and Mastrocola Elementary 1/3 of the time. And Rick Glatz, who's our person at the middle school, could not be here tonight because he's at a parent-teacher conference about his son.
Dennis Pym, Gateway teacher at James Mastrocola Upper Elementary School.
Sharon Putney, Merrimack High School Gateway. Cynthia Cronin, Thornton's Ferry Elementary Gateway and Mastrocola Elementary Gateway.
In looking at our charge that we were given, and after having met with leadership and then again with PERC, we feel that we've completed our mission. And just briefly to recap it for people at home, we've clearly defined the entrance and exit criteria for the program. We've developed, after many hours of laboring, a sequential district-wide curriculum of skills. We've looked very, very carefully at transitioning between levels. In doing this, we looked at where we were, what was happening at the time. We looked at information and data about the program. We visited other programs within New Hampshire. We looked at current literature in the field. We worked very briefly with 2 outside facilitators who helped launch us on our mission. And as I said before, we looked very carefully at the scope and sequence of skills that would be addressed with the children throughout the levels. And I turn this over to Dennis, who will highlight some of the communication pieces that we've worked on.
3 of the things we addressed were the handbook. And each of the schools really does, if it mentions Gateway, it's only in passing, so we felt we should have something more definitive. So the statement we created addresses all of the levels in a generic form, shows the slight differences between the programs, but at least lets people know, not only parents and students, but teachers, what's available at our district at this time. We also have a brochure, I believe you've seen before, that we're planning to hand out like during open house nights. If you haven't seen that yet, we do have a copy of it here we could pass around. And we also were able to develop a rather extensive movie, thanks to the help of Sharon and her team. Kind of depicts kind of a day in the life of, where we went around to see what the different programs are, what they consist of, and what is Gateway all about. We're in the process of trying to get to work with Pam Tinker to get that on the public access, so that'll be something that we can have on the television. Our bandwidth doesn't really work on our websites. We decided not to do it in that fashion at this time. The other thing I want to talk about are the exit procedures. And we got a couple of bulleted items on there where we do notify parents and teachers and students. If we have any concerns at all, we address those before they. We don't usually have to wait for necessarily an end of quarter type of thing. If we notice any concerns, we do address them and get them taken care of. We do work with the parents. At any time, a student can opt out of the program, but we do ask that they get notification from their parents. Sometimes a discussion might ensue from that, depending on what the situation might be. Occasionally, there's a probation period, not so often, but occasionally where a student, for some reason, has fallen out of graces, as it were, or for some reason may find at a particular time they're involved in so many activities at a given time, much like ourselves, that they need a break during a particular time, so they might be asked, that they might opt to take themselves out of the program, which is sort of a probation if they were to do that consistently, where they weren't able to maintain their schedule throughout the year. Generally, we try to bring all the parties involved. If someone's going to be removed from the program permanently, parents definitely should be involved, the students, teachers, and everyone that has a word to say, so we make the best decision for the best opportunities for the child. At the bottom of that sheet is also our transitions. We try to make sure that the child is not only meeting the minimum standards that we have, but also is keeping up with what's going on in their own classrooms at all times. We try to meet between our different levels, so children that are coming from the lower grades, I know who they are. I'll get a list of those students, so I can be looking out for those and also get some of the background about them. Likewise, I pass a similar list along to Rick Latz at the middle school, who in turn passes it along to Sharon. At the end of the year, we also put a notation on there on the report cards that whether or not we're recommending continuation in the program, or if not, a student would have known ahead of time. We wouldn't surprise them at that point. It's a surprise, you're not coming back next year, but rather there would have been some discussion ahead of time, but it would be noted if a recommendation was not being given at that point, why not? Sharon's going to take the next component.
There's 2 documents that I wanted to mention to you today, and the first one is the categories of performance objectives. And on this document, it's been divided into 3 main categories: the learning objectives, creative thinking objectives, and the affective personal objectives. And we're very pleased with this document because this is something that is going to travel with the student from the time they enter the Gateway program all the way up through grade 12. And there's going to be a rating of one of 3 letters. They will either have an I, which means that the concept has been introduced, an R if it's being reinforced, and when the child reaches mastery of that concept, there'll be an M. And these will go into their records, and the Gateway people at the next level will also receive those. So we'll be able to really work individually on the students' goals and take each student from where they are at the time and be able to watch them progress through their years in the Gateway program. So you can see that there's many objectives that are going to be completed, 33 learning objectives, 17 creative thinking objectives, and 38 affective personal objectives. These will be completed by the end of each year. And this will also be a reference for the classroom teacher. As far as increasing communication with the classroom teacher, they'll be able to look at this document as well and take a good look at their students as well. So that furthers the communication between the teacher, a parent, the student, and the Gateway coordinator. So we're very pleased with how well we're going to be able to use this document and really gear the program to the individual students within it. The other document that goes right along with that is the sequential district-wide curriculum matrix. And you can see that's divided the same exact way with the learning objectives, creative thinking, and affective personal. And this kind of works hand in glove with a performance objective because these are now the activities. These are the means to get to the end, which is those objectives, having those objectives be met. So you can see there's a wide range of activities that can be used to reach the final goals, which are to have those students reach mastery. So there's a couple subcategories under some of the major categories under learning, also under creative thinking, and the affective personal. So those two pieces are really going to help with assessment of the students and also with communication. So just kind of to summarize some of these newer documents that sort of fill in the blanks, some areas that we felt like would really round out this master plan revision. The first being to really get the communication component down, and between the brochure and the movie and the information in the handbook and the performance objectives, we feel pretty good about the amount of communication that's going to be able to happen on many different levels. The other area is assessment, and now with our performance objectives and our curriculum matrix working together, we feel that we'll be able to assess our students well at the end of each year before they move along to the next grade or the next level. And the final part being the transition. So we have clearly defined exit and transition procedures in place, and also the transition when a student moves to the next level. There will be increased communication between the Gateway teachers, and also they'll be able to look at those performance objectives. So that kind of summarizes what we've done to kind of complete the process, but I don't know if there's any questions that anyone has for us at this time that they would like to ask.
Are there comments or questions to come from members of the board? Rose?
Good evening, and thank you for coming back once again before us. First of all, I would like to state that I'm very pleased to finally see all this hard work being things that I know that has been happening for a number of years. As my children went through the elementary school, you know, one of them was very involved throughout the process, and I know that, you know, there was always an understanding within the district that, you know, this program was definitely of benefit. But I think, you know, the piece that was probably missing all along the way was all the concrete pieces that we have now in this document. Was, you know, the piece that goes into the parent handbook, well, you know, Gateway is not this, you know, well, how do you find out about that, or how do you get your child into that? You know, I think it's very well spelled out, and I think that's very important and very appropriate. And I also am very pleased to see the all the pieces as far as tracking and how students and what the actual objectives are, and the level of that objective, whether the child has just been introduced and has done the 3 steps up through mastery. And I think that's great because, you know, children all develop at different rates, and depending on what else is going on in their school day and throughout the rest of the curriculum. I think it's great that we now have a process of how to monitor where they're at with everything. And so I'm very pleased to see all of this, especially in light of the district logic model, where we are looking at, how do we, make our decisions based on the data. Well, now we have a way to make what we know is successful and works. We now have a way to show it's successful and it works. And I think that all your hard work, it will definitely benefit the district as a whole, and so I really do appreciate it. One of the pieces as you went through the process that did come to mind, just because having just finished the very in-depth social studies curriculum, is that actually there's two pieces to that I wanted to talk to you about. The first piece was, will you have guidelines, or from a teacher standpoint, from your role, as to how you anticipate to assess how each of these individual things at some point? I know that this is a document that's still somewhat in more process, and we always want to refine everything. But is this something that you envision, for the person that takes over your role next? That there's some type of either guideline or manual in place that will show how do you go about assessing these things, or is it very individual, up to the teacher, the school, the project that happens to be worked on? That was a lot of a question.
We realize there's more work to be done, and Cynthia and I have talked. Since we share Mastrocola Elementary School and then have our own home schools, we certainly need to be talking so we're on the same wavelength and being consistent throughout the elementary schools when we're looking at the children and looking at the skills. So we realize there's more work to be done.
Well, I certainly can see, just with what we have before us tonight, how, I'm sure a lot of this was, or has, obviously it has to have been going on for you to be able to even produce a document, to this level. It's just been a matter of actually pulling it all together and putting it together. And then the other piece of my question, after having worked with the social studies curriculum, has there been much discussion about how you as a team can interact or be more involved in the actual curriculum development or curriculum piece? Just because, we all know we have so many things on our plate, with our literacy efforts, and then the continuing, piece for the math and the standards that we, have to make a certain grade at, so to speak. And, we find ourselves with less and less time to further enhance things. So my question is what actually are the roles of each of you in helping teachers identify, find enrichment activities for students in regular curriculum? Because I don't know if that was necessarily addressed in the document.
Well, I know at the elementary level, often in conjunction with the librarian, I would work with students, say, in either that are first graders or second graders that are clearly reading above grade level and that they could use enrichment. We would not necessarily give the teacher extra materials, although I've done that also, and I'm sure we all have given guidance and materials to teachers, but we've also can take it a step further in that, for instance, I meet right now with a second grade reading group called Reading Buddies. We do two groups, the school librarian and I at Thorntons Ferry, and I know there was a need at Mastrocola to work with a few exceptional kindergartners. So I work in conjunction with the teacher, but in that the children are pulled out for that activity, though. But I have also, and I know my colleagues have too, also given materials to a teacher as needed. I don't know if that answers your question.
That actually did answer my question, because I just wanted, to understand that it was more than just a pull-out program. That it also was interfacing with the teachers and being a resource for the teacher, and possibly even like a mentoring modeling, especially for our newer, less experienced teachers, because, of the different type of skills that you teach and expect from your students.
Often the teachers will come to us when they have a student or students that need more enrichment. And for instance, I put together some packets for kindergarten readers at Thorntons Ferry because they don't get pulled out. But there were a few that needed help. Well, not help, enrichment. They could use more.
Okay. And the last question right now is, will this document be made available to individual teachers, or will it be a resource in the library for teachers to know that these are the kinds of things that are going to be happening with their students that are involved in the Enrichment Gateway activities?
My understanding is that there's going to be one in each of the libraries, and one available, I think, for the principals, and then each Gateway coordinator is going to have one. I believe that's correct. So there'll be at least 2, possibly 3 copies in each school.
Further questions or comments for the Gateway presenters? Jody.
Thank you very much for coming tonight. I had the privilege of participating in the development of these guidelines by being a member of the Program Evaluation and Review Committee, and also being a member of a subcommittee I must say that our Gateway teachers are a very responsive, receptive group of teachers, and we're very, very fortunate as a district to have them teaching our children. With that said, I'd also like to echo some of the sentiments that Rose has made. I believe the majority of what you see here in documentation is what has been going on for years in our Gateway department. What we needed as a school district is something formal in order for us to quantify and measure curriculum as well as children's progress as they move up through the program. By having this documentation readily available, in black and white, available to anybody, we have put our Gateway program in a position that it's equal to other academic programs in our school district where it belongs. This is another academic program that I think has a great value to our school district, and by putting these forms of measurement and guidelines in writing, I just believe that we make our program even more credible than it was prior to doing this. I know these teachers and some other subcommittee members and administration have worked very, very hard. There was a lot of brainstorming went on. There was a lot of give and take, and I think the product that we've come up with is a really good one. I specifically like the communication piece because I do know Gateway is a program, we had a lot of discussion about this, that unless your child isn't necessarily participating in it in a pull-out program, there are other areas of benefit, such as that Cynthia Cronin mentioned, that the Gateway program is responsible for interacting with your child, and the more information we can get out there to our parents, I think the better. And we talked about having this information presented in handbooks and on the school district website. I just think that's a great benefit, and hopefully will help to answer some of the questions that I know a lot of parents have had. And the transition, the entrance and exiting, I think is fabulous. I'm really, really in support of the work that this document has brought forward, and I thank you very, very much for listening to people's concerns and being so receptive and taking what people have said and suggested and having you turn about and provide us with this. I'm very appreciative of it. Thank you.
Thank you. Further comment or discussion? I'll echo Jody's sentiments. It was through PERC that Jody and I both came in contact with the document, and in a subcommittee meeting that we held, I can tell you confidently, as we went through the charge with this team of Gateway educators, that they've met every point of the charge that's given. They're aware that some of the community response or some of the perception that was out there certainly needed to focus on the assessment, the entrance and exit pieces, as well as the communication, and I feel confident that they've crafted documentation that supports that, and certainly will make our job as board members a lot easier in discussing the program and how it plays out within the community. So if there's no further comment or discussion, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for coming this evening. Thank you for your hard work on this.
Thanks.
And we will move the Gateway guidelines to our consent agenda for our March 5th meeting. Next item on our item 11 on our agenda is a request for a school day waiver for Reeds Ferry Elementary School and Merrimack Middle School from Commissioner Tracy. Marge, would you please speak to that?
Certainly. This is really the first time that I've made a request of Commissioner Tracy for a waiver. But in fact, you might recall that on January 17th, early in the morning when I have to make a call about school, we had 2 power outages, one at the middle school and one at Reeds Ferry. And so school was called off. The children did not report. However, within a period of time, the electricity did come on in both places, so I am pleased to tell you that the staff did report to each of the respective schools and put in the given day. So in trying to determine what might be done relative to a waiver, I have conferred with the commissioner, and what he has asked of this, if you're thinking that that would be the right thing to do, that is for these 2 groups of children, they would put in 179 days as compared to 180. The board needs to direct me to write a letter to the commissioner and make that request of him. And as you can see, not only is he asking for a letter, but he is also asking for a set of minutes to go along with that letter to demonstrate that in fact the request was made at a board meeting. So I'm putting it forward so that if in fact you were to approve this, we would get a response back in March.
I would like to make a motion to direct the Superintendent, Marge Chaffrey, to write a letter to Commissioner Lionel Tracy asking that a school day be waived for the students at Reeds Ferry and Merrimack Middle School, so that children at those 2 buildings would only attend 179 days instead of the 180-day requirement. Seconded by Jennifer. Is there any comment or discussion from the board? George and then Rose.
Memory serves, and maybe there's not enough kilowattage. We spent quite a bit of money to put a generator at the middle school. As I remember when that was part of the construction, we voted for an emergency generator to be put up there for that building to be used as a shelter in the event of power outages, and it was not functional, or what happened?
Well, first of all, there was a warrant article several years ago to raise and appropriate on the town side $90,000 for an emergency generator. That was to be at the upper elementary school, which is currently the upper elementary school, but back then it was the middle school. That warrant article wasn't enacted by the town council, I believe. They didn't go forward with it. They took the $90,000 and used it to reduce taxes that year, I believe. When we were constructing the middle school, as part of the plan, there was an emergency generator already incorporated into the project, but it wasn't. It had the capacity, but it didn't have the capabilities to specifically load those areas that needed to be loaded for it to be used as an emergency shelter, like the kitchen, like some of the bathrooms. It was just kind of a precautionary thing. So the town put forward a proposal to us to raise around $6,000 to make it more functional. So it wasn't a case of we spent a lot of money on the generator. It was already in the building project initially. As far as the functioning of the generator, it provided heat for the building. It lit up the hallways, every other light in the hallway. The toilets at the middle school are the kind that sense you leaving the toilet, so they automatically flush. The only sets of bathrooms that are wired to operate are the ones on the first level near the gym, near the cafeteria, I believe. So they didn't have full functionality of the bathrooms. Also in the classrooms, it was pretty much every other light that was lit. So it wasn't that it wasn't functioning, it just wasn't functioning to a degree to allow classes to continue without some sort of compromise. So I think that was the decision that was made not to have school that day.
Rose?
I'm trying to remember what I was going to ask. I would just say that it's my understanding that the reason why we did not have school at those two places was the previous day, the circumstances that we ended up with Thornton Ferry, that we were promised to have electricity within a very short period by the time the kids got off the buses. So we allowed to have school that day. The kids got to the school. There was no power at the school. And we ended up, having to do the shuttle situation to Reed's Ferry. And I think we didn't want to have to put ourselves in that predicament again. And so I believe that was a part of the reasoning why we chose not to hold school those 2 days. And, I think that, I would support this.
And Rose, you're right. It was very arduous the day before, having school in all 6 buildings and to have to transfer the students from Thornton's up to Reed's Ferry. At the middle school, while they had power, my understanding was it was still not the most ideal circumstances for educators there. The administration fielded a tremendous amount of phone calls. And I know that just erring on the side of caution for these 2 buildings was the appropriate thing to do on that second day of the power outages here in Merrimack. Any further discussion or comment to come from the board? Seeing none, we'll put the question to the vote. All those in favor of directing the superintendent to petition the Commissioner of Education, so signify by saying aye. Aye. Motion carries 5-0-0. Thank you. At this point in our agenda, as we are wont to do, we have preliminary New England Common Assessment Program results. Debbie, what is the information out of the gate for us this year?
I have some more handouts for you with some summary statements that may be helpful. What I provided you in your board packet was a letter that will be going home with parents with the NECAP results, as well as a statement to be found on the Department of Ed website about NECAP in general. And today what you are receiving from me is a little more detailed information. These are the state summary sheets and the district summary sheets on how our students did on the test that they took in October of 2006. And you will see that I literally cut and paste a column of proficiency percentage in. That was the only way I could figure out to do it so that you could see it. And what that column of proficiency is all about is a percentage combining level 4 and level 3. So as far as the charts, those are just for you to look at your leisure. But the summary statements show some pretty significant points. First of all, I want you to realize that we will not be receiving our AYP designation until June, probably the end of June at the earliest. And so I cannot tell you really what these results mean as far as being a school or a district in need of improvement. We will not know that until June. This is just information about how our students did on the test. Our students did pretty well. They scored mainly higher than the state level, and in almost every case they scored higher than they did last year at the same grade level. We've been cautioned, however, by the State Department we need to be careful about comparing grade 4 students last year to grade 4 students this year. It's not the same group of students, and it's actually not even the exact same test. So I say that knowing that the way AYP will be determined is partially based on some comparison, but we have to be a little careful about that. I'm very excited about a statement that appears about halfway down the page. The general population of Merrimack students' reading scores in all grades exceeded last year's percentage of proficiency. And I think that that attests to the work that the district's been doing in the area of literacy. I'm also pleased with the progress that we've made across the board in some of the differentiated groups, and you don't have that information here, but it is available at the state website if you do a little bit of digging, and I gave you the information on the material that went out in the packet on how you can look at that. It's interesting to see that, just like in the whole state, females do better in reading and in writing than males do as far as level of proficiency, but the mathematics percentages were balanced pretty much. So I thought you might enjoy looking at some of these district summary statements, and I'll be back to you with more information with some digging of data that principals are doing now in the various buildings, looking at the disaggregated groups of students, looking at individual students who perhaps did not make proficiency, and trying to figure out a plan for how we can help them during the rest of the year. And then, of course, when the AYP report comes out in June, I'll surely be back to tell you what that means for our district. I'd be happy to try to answer any questions on this preliminary information.
Okay. Are there questions or comments to come from the board? George?
And I apologize, I don't have the information in front of me. There was, I think it was in the journal, information listed on this test comparing us to other towns. And when I was looking at it, my general impression was that we didn't do very well compared to some of the other surrounding towns. There was a lot of not proficient information indicated there was a lot of not proficient students. And I would have to bring the article to reflect upon that with you on that, Debbie. But is there any information as to how we did based on surrounding districts?
George, I want to intervene just for a minute because I don't have the article here. I'm having a hard time getting the journal delivered to my house recently. But in a cursory glance at that article, I believe it was comparing different tests, though. It was that, I remember Hollis Brookline being mentioned, also Amherst and Bedford, and I think to have that article in front of us would make a discussion better, because I think we're talking about apples and oranges here. I don't think that we're comparing the same testing.
I think it did say, I think it was the kneecap test, though.
Because there were different, all I remember too is there were pronunciations on the acronyms. They may be taking the NEWA. Jody?
I read the article, and without having it right in front of me from recall, they were discussing different tests that other school districts are using. Debbie was quoted in there saying that Merrimack wasn't currently using that test due to the cost, but they did compare some school districts. They did a comparison with kneecap results, and I came away with the impression, George, that we were doing pretty well comparable to other towns, because I was looking at populations. And when you talk about percentages, you've got to look at the total population. So again, this is without numbers in front of me. I think we definitely would have to have an article in front of us. But with the data that was presented, my impression was that we're right on target, we're comparable, we're even better than a few other surrounding towns, because some of them, the population is so small that if you look at a percentage of that population, it would skew the numbers. So.
And I think, too, it's often more helpful for us to look at where we compare to the state average than it is to a district that may have a completely different population than we have. Debbie?
Yes, I was going to say I would be happy to see that article. I'd value that. You said that was in the journal, George.
Yeah, and it would be interesting to see where we are on the same test, you know, compared to other districts.
Thank you.
I'm sure that information is available at some point.
Okay.
Thank you.
Further comment or questions? Okay, Debbie, thank you for the presentation. We will certainly be looking forward to our AYP designation come late June this year. At this point in our agenda this evening, we are again going to revisit some of our constituents' budget correspondence. This evening, Matt is going to speak to us pertaining to one of the discussion points that was raised surrounding why don't we go to Linux versus using a Microsoft-based system. Matt?
Thanks. Currently, right now, we're a Microsoft shop, so to speak. All our desktops, with the exception of a couple of Apples, and all our servers run off of Microsoft products. If we went to switch from that to Linux, you have to remember, when we buy Microsoft Office products, we're not going to Best Buy and getting the box with the CDs, paying $400 for Microsoft Office. We get an educational discount. We get a site license. It's anywhere from like $35 to $50 a machine, so it's not really cost prohibitive. But if we went to make the switch to another operating system, we'd have to redo probably around 1,000 machines and probably around 20 servers. The cost involved in orchestrating that would be fairly significant. Also, when you're looking at changing an operating system, even though it's no cost or low cost, you have to look at the software that supports all the applications that we have. Currently, right now, we have PowerSchool, our student information system, working very well at the high school, working well at the middle school. It's going to be, going district-wide as far as, grades. PowerSchool doesn't run on Linux. We'd have to find a new student information system. Our fund accounting, budget accounting software, that doesn't run on Linux either. We'd have to find a new package for that. The library automation system is not compatible. Either is the food service software. So if you're looking at changing, you may save a little bit because you wouldn't be buying the licenses for Microsoft Office products. You could use OpenOffice or some other Linux variant. But you'd probably have to spend upwards of maybe $400,000 to $500,000 to replace software that we use district-wide every day, if you could even find that type of specialized software like a student information program, a fund accounting package, library automation that would work with the Linux operating system. So it's a good idea, merits some consideration for the future to see if more programs are supported by Linux. I know it has some advantages. I'm not an expert in it by any means of any stretch of the imagination as far as, security and virus protection and whatnot. But, right now I don't think that would be something that would be feasible for us.
Okay, thank you, Matt. Questions about the operating systems or consideration? If you'll remember, this is third of our installments of looking at the constituents' budget correspondence. Since our agenda was lengthy this evening, we are only covering one more this evening. I believe that we have just a couple more items that we will discuss at our next meeting, and that will conclude this agenda item for us. But Matt, thank you for your presentation. I think it means a lot to the constituents to know that their concerns have been addressed in some fashion, and that the board is attentive. Next item on our agenda is the first reading of updated or new policies. As you recall, this is an ongoing process for the board this year to have its policy manual updated. There are 6 to be read by our superintendent this evening regarding student absences and excuses, truancy, student absences, student release precautions, student conduct, discipline, and due process, and finally, early admission to grade 1. Marge?
Thank you. For the first one, student absences and excuses, this is what it says. Regular and punctual patterns of attendance will be required of each student enrolled in the district. Building principals are responsible for developing student handbooks, which will include rules regarding student absences, excuses, and truancy. These rules will apply to all students. The second one, entitled Truancy. Unauthorized absences from school is considered truancy and will be treated as such in accordance with the rules of the Parent-Student Handbook. Any staff member aware of a student leaving a class or the school grounds without permission shall report the departure immediately to the principal. The third one, entitled Student Absences. Each school principal is responsible for overseeing attendance procedures and ensuring that, number 1, attendance is accurately checked and reported to the school office daily for each class, 2, all student absences are recorded, and 3, all permanent records of student attendance are maintained at the SAU office. The fourth one, student release precautions. All school personnel are to be instructed to refuse requests for children to leave the school grounds once they have come to the school or have been deposited there from the school buses or other vehicles. Children shall not leave the school grounds from the time they arrive until the time of their departure for home, except as follows. Number 1, no school or grade may be dismissed before the regular hour for dismissal, except with the approval of the Office of the Superintendent of Schools. 2, no teacher may permit any individual student to leave school prior to the regular hour of dismissal, except by permission of the principal or his or her designated representatives. 3, no student may be permitted to leave school prior to the dismissal hour for any reason unless permission of the parent or guardian has been first secured, nor sent home unless the responsible adult is at the home. Any student being released during the school day must be released through the school office when he/she leaves and must report to the office when he/she returns, except that students who are ill may also be released through the nurse's office. Students will be released only when legally authorized by the parent or legal guardian. Students traveling on school buses to school-sponsored activities will return from the activity on the bus unless released to their parents. The fifth policy, entitled Student Conduct, Discipline, and Due Process in the Safe School Zone. The board endorses the following principles of student conduct. Number 1, respect for law and those given authority to administer it shall be expected of all students. This includes conformity to school rules as well as to general provisions of the law regarding minors. Number 2, respect for the rights of others, consideration of their privileges, and cooperative citizenship shall be expected of all members of the school community. Number 3, respect for the real and personal property, pride in one's work, and exemplary personal standards for courtesy, decency, honesty, and wholesome attitudes shall be maintained. Number 4, respect for individual worth and diversity is the obligation of the school. Diligence and a desire to benefit from the opportunity is the obligation of the students. The board expects student conduct to contribute to a productive learning climate. Individual rights are to be honored and protected in all instances. However, the rights of one individual shall not take precedence over those of another individual or of the group itself, and all students shall have equal rights and equal responsibilities in the classroom or at any school-sponsored activity. The board further recognizes the right of each school to establish disciplinary procedures in accordance with RSA 193:13 and RSA 193D through the development of administrative procedures which are approved by the superintendent or his or her designee. Due process shall be afforded to any student involved in a proceeding that may result in suspension, exclusion, or expulsion. Students expelled from school may be reinstated by the board under the provisions of RSA 19:13. The superintendent may modify expulsion requirements as provided in RSA 193:14-4. In addition, the district shall comply with the provisions of the Individual with Disabilities Education Act, IDEA, when disciplining students. The last policy is a policy that is already in place in the school board's manual, and I'm reading it because we're reviewing or going to review all the policies that are there to determine whether the board wants to retain this policy, modify it, or remove it. It's entitled Early Admission to Grade 1. Effective January 4th, 1999, a child must have attained the age of 6 by September 30 in order to attend first grade in the Merrimack School District. This is in accordance with RSA 193:1, Roman numeral 2, duty of parent, compulsory attendance by pupil, effective January 1st, 1998. Any child, however, whose 6th birthday falls on or between October 1st and December 31st may be eligible for first grade attendance. Refer to Administrative Procedure 6100 for the process to be followed for early admission. I will tell you that on any policy that the board already has in place, what I am doing it is submitting it to Barrett Christina, who is the attorney for the New Hampshire School Boards Association, and he in turn takes a look at the policy to see if it's written, if you will, correctly. And so he has offered up that if the board chooses to keep this particular policy, after the word entrance, it would be important to put such a determination of eligibility will be made by the superintendent in consultation with the building principal, because by law it talks in terms of the superintendent being responsible for the placement of all children. So all that does is strengthen the policy. On the other hand, if the board determines that it wants to eliminate this policy, he recommends the following, and I will put these in your packet for the second review, but I just wanted you to know that he had responded to this. It would say, effective January 4th, 1999, a child must have attained the age of 6 by September 30 in order to attend first grade in the Merrimack School District. The district will not accept students on an early admissions basis. No exceptions to this policy will be granted, with the legal references down at the bottom.
Comment or question to come from the board? Rose?
I have a couple of general questions that I think speak to most of the policies that you read to us. At the bottom of the page, it lists the legal references. And, for example, in the first one, the student absences and excuses is a very short, not a lot of meat to it, which obviously the meat to it is all in the legal references, and that, you know, seems to be to go through a lot of them. Would it be possible for us to actually, like, have an addendum that actually has the RSAs, so that if someone did have a need to further question the policy, that we would have it all together?
I think, Rose, we could perhaps put those, as these, all the policies are placed online, perhaps we could put the corresponding RSAs behind them, or just talk in terms of how that might be set up when we put this document on our website.
Okay. And then the next question would be that many of the policies speak to the student handbooks. So I guess my next question would be, what will be our plan to align all the current student handbooks so that when these policies are approved by the board, that, you know, that the student handbook and the policy are in alignment? What will be the plan for that?
It is, I guess, my expectation that I'm responsible for putting together the administrative procedures that back up the policy. And I think I was saying to you in the beginning of this process that when I first conferred with Barrett Christina, he recommended that the policies be kept in a policy manual for the school board, and that the administrative procedures would be separate. So as we go along and as these are approved, it would be my responsibility to ensure that there is a consistency and continuity from one procedure to the next. So as far as the attendance procedures, that would be something that I would be about doing in conjunction with the principals.
Okay. And then the last question, and maybe it's something I need to submit to you, or being that kindergarten is not mandatory, but we do have it, and it would be my understanding that we might have a situation where a parent would want to admit a child that was basically in a similar situation but needing to enter kindergarten. Will we have a policy that addresses that?
Well, I want to first talk to you in terms of the early admission to grade 1 came into being because you're absolutely right, the compulsory attendance age is 6. And so when in fact we did not have kindergarten, we had only first grade, we would have some parents whose child did not or exceeded that date, and therefore they would want to have them tested. And in fact, that's exactly what happens in our procedures. We go through and do an assessment of the children to determine whether they are appropriate for first grade or not. I think it was the feeling of the board, at least when we put kindergarten into place, that we were not going to look at any early admission for kindergarten, given the fact that it is not compulsory.
Right.
And so that was the feeling of the board
Okay.
at that time, and I would assume it might be such now. This is surfaced again because the last time this policy was reviewed or approved, which was in January of '99, the thought was that we would bring it back again to take a look at it when we were going through the whole policy manual.
Further questions or comment? And Marge, tonight we don't need to make the determination whether we should just maintain it, modify it, or remove it. That can be undone.
No, in fact, what I will do, I just wanted you to know, because Barrett just sent me this information, what I will do for the second review is I will add and highlight what the sentence would be to firm it up if you determine to keep it, and I will also put what it would be if you determine to eliminate it, because we still need to have a representation, so if someone asks, they would know that we don't have an early admissions policy. We need to state it in either way, in either case.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Seeing none. Is there any correspondence to come before the board this evening? Rose?
Yes, I have a piece of correspondence from Representative Peter Batula, and this is concerning a meeting of the NH Cafe, and that is the group for the funding suit. And this meeting was held on Tuesday, February 13th. I was not able to attend this meeting, as Marge was not able to attend this meeting because of the Budget Committee hearing that evening. And Tom Mahan, who was the town council representative, was not able to attend that meeting because of a town council meeting. So Peter Batula stepped up and took notes and attended that meeting, as he has attended almost all of those meetings for us. And in this letter, this is actually one of many hearings or open meetings that were being offered up ideas of how we might go about defining adequacy and finding a cost mechanism for that. And the letter just gives basic information about the different proposals that were given that night. And I believe that, you know, it's my hope to, as the other meetings proceed, to, you know, to continue to monitor the website to see what's being proposed and to follow this. And certainly as legislation comes forward, you know, it's my hope to represent the board, to go up to Concord and to be a part of that process and keep the public informed about what's being looked at and what's being considered as we move forward.
Marge?
Would it be beneficial to take that document, and perhaps I've received one too, did it just come today? Okay. And make a copy of what Peter has put forward for all the board members, because he really went to that meeting on our behalf where none of us could really go because we did have the budget hearing. So we'll just put that in your packet for the next time, or mail it out under separate covers so you have it. That'd be helpful.
And as a follow-up, I would like to thank Mr. Batula for going above and beyond the call of duty to actually taking the next step and putting together kind of his minutes. And one of the pieces that he did point out in this was that he just stating the facts, and there was no editorial on what he thought was a good suggestion or not. He just put the facts out there, and so that was certainly appreciated.
Okay. Jody?
I know, Emily, when we got the email notice, and I was concerned because we were all tied up with the budget hearing, there was mention of DVDs being available. Was our school district able to obtain a copy?
I spoke with Sandy, who was requesting one at the time. Has one arrived?
It has not been brought forward yet. Londonderry takes responsibility for making a DVD for all of the towns that are there, and as of Friday they have not been put together yet, so we'll receive one under separate cover when they have been put together.
Thank you.
Further correspondence to come before the board? If I may, I asked Marge for a piece of correspondence that pertained to the asbestos abatement issue in the buildings. During the Budget Committee's discussions about asbestos, I was under the impression that several of the committee members felt that this was a situation that families weren't aware of, that we were putting their kids in jeopardy or in harm's way. And in fact, there is a letter that goes out to parents at the beginning of each school year that addresses the AHIRA Act, the law that requires all schools with kindergarten through 12th grade to be inspected to identify any asbestos-containing materials, and that the law requires the development of a management plan, which our district has done. The letter outlines the service provider that was brought in, which is Hall Kimbrell Environmental Services, to bring our schools into compliance. And it details that the management plan is in effect and has been in effect. It also states that any parent or constituent who would have interest in seeing this document, that it is housed at the greenhouse or at the superintendent's office, and that file is available for review to include copies of individual building inspection reports. Any further correspondence? Any comments to come from the board this evening? Deb? She falls over the table.
I just wanted to comment that this evening Judy Nicholson was in the audience. She is from the Department of Human Health and Human Services and is in charge of the Youth Risk Behavior Survey. You may recall that when we last talked about this, she was not present. She came to the Budget Committee meeting the next night, but she was in the audience this evening, and I could see she was very pleased that that went on the consent agenda and was voted in. She's not present at the moment, but I wanted to thank her for being here tonight. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Debbie. Is there any new business to come before the board this evening? Jody?
Could I speak to comment, please?
Certainly.
I just wanted to clarify some information. Our last meeting, we had a parent, Julie Mitchell, come and speak under public participation. There were 2 items that I wanted to speak to regarding her comments. In an effort to be factual with information, I just wanted to make sure that it was clear. Mrs. Mitchell, she stated that there were not many schools, quote unquote, as stated by the board in past meetings, that were using user fees. I just wanted to make it clear that when I presented the athletic fee proposal, what I did was I outlined the Class L schools that currently were using the user fees, and I went into great detail about which schools were using what type of a fee and what the dollar amount was. I was specifically citing other Class L schools, of which Merrimack is one, in my presentation of the fee. So I want to make sure that that was clear. I didn't actually use the wording that many other schools were using fees. That wasn't something that came out of my mouth. Also, Julie Mitchell had asked if the school board had considered the dollar amount that we spend on freshman sports programs when proposing this athletic fee, and I just wanted to follow up with some information. I'm assuming that she was referring to possibly cutting freshman athletics from the program in order to make up the money for the fee. So I had the athletic department produce some numbers for me, and I have it here. I have it on email. If anybody else is interested in the numbers, just go ahead and let me know. But basically, for a total of 31 sports that are offered for freshman teams, our school district spends, according to the information that was given to me by the athletic department at the high school, $31,228 on our freshman sports. I would just like to reiterate again my position regarding the proposal of this fee. It is my position. It has never been my intention to cut programs. So if someone were to recommend eliminating the freshman programs, that is not something that I would support. But I felt since Mrs. Mitchell had brought that up that we should at least have accurate data, as she has requested that we present. And each board member, like I said, if you're interested in this information, I'd be happy to share it. But I would not support cuts to the freshman programs for our athletic department at this time. Thank you.
George?
I would just like to say to Jody, thank you for your due diligence on your numbers and keeping with the correspondence of the town, of the people in the town that have issue with anything we propose, you've come across with accurate information to rebut or concur with what they have said. Thank you for that effort.
Is there any new business to come before the board this evening? Seeing none, are there any committee reports? Jennifer?
I met with the technology committee just this afternoon, where we covered the technology plan update and the replacement plan, and also just they shared a bit of good news that their technology resource center has been opened here at the high school, and they actually, I found this very interesting, seeing that we saw the presentation on virtual high school, that there are 2 coordinators that are planning on being trained coming up in the next couple of weeks, that their training should be going through. So that was exciting for me to hear that it's actually starting to roll out.
Great. Any other committee reports to come before the board? Rose?
The Healthcare Containment Committee met again, and we worked on the next steps in the plan that we're moving forward with, and looking at areas that we can be proactive in engaging the population that takes advantage of the health care, and proactive manners that they can, in addition to saving themselves money personally, for the greater good, will end up saving the school district a lot of money. And you know, you can look forward to hearing the exact steps and the exact things that we have been doing later this. It'll probably be, I think we are targeting possibly May for like a yearly report because it is a long-term process, and you know, it's something that when you have so many different groups coming together and working towards a product, it does take a while to get where you want to be. But I think the team is gaining momentum and moving forward.
Thank you, Rose. Marge?
I just wanted to do a clarification around the Energy Management Committee that had been meeting at our last meeting, or seeming so long ago in January. We talked in terms of, given that the board selected option C, if there were additional funds to be accrued, when those were accrued, what would be the priority list that we would look at? That is, would the board look toward working for ventilation? Would it work toward other areas? And there was some notion of having that Energy Management Committee continue to meet to take a look at that. I just want to know if that would be the board's intention, so that I can go forward and reconvene the meeting, assuming the committee, assuming that Jody and George will continue to serve, and we would ask the people who serve from the Planning and Building Committee. And
George?
Assuming it passes. So after the vote is taken and the warrant is passed and moved forward, we would meet then to decide how to continue.
Okay.
Yes. I would be okay with that.
Jody?
Well, I'd be more than willing to. Also, I'm a huge supporter of this proposal, and I really believe in it. My question, I know, Marge, we had talked about best suited, the forum for this discussion being best suited, and we talked a lot about the School Planning and Building Committee. I wonder if we might possibly, I think having George and I being school board reps is a great idea with administration involved, but possibly the entire Planning and Building Committee being in on some of these discussions, because they are the ones that have been working on the capital improvement plan. I don't know if that would be too arduous to have them all, but it's something that we could think about. I personally would like the entire committee, if that's something that other people were in agreement. I mean, having Shannon and Lori involved was a fantastic thing, but since a lot of this would just be in discussion regarding capital improvement plans, I would love that entire committee if they were willing, and if you thought it was something that was feasible to be involved.
I would be supportive of that, and I think that would be a good use of that committee's talents and expertise if the administration would take that under advisement.
My other reason for asking the board its opinion is because even if, in fact, this particular warden didn't pass, we're still going to be responsible for putting together a capital improvement plan, and through this energy audit, other areas have been addressed. We need to pull those apart and take a look at where they would fall out in a capital improvement plan. So I really had other intents, not only off the vote and what happens there, but in preparation for putting together a capital improvement plan, because we now have so much more information than we had prior to the energy audit.
Other comments? Okay. Any further committee reports? The two meetings that I did attend have been well publicized, one being the School Budget Committee. Their public hearing was held last Tuesday, and Chairman Heinrich had indicated that it was the most public participation or the largest audience he had seen. I believe that there were 27 members from the audience who spoke at public participation, and the audience was filled with a variety of people from the community. I did speak to the adjustments that had been made at that time, and the deliberative session will be the next time that the Budget Committee will convene. They will have a meeting following the deliberative session. The other meeting that I attended was Program Evaluation and Review Committee. PERC met just before Valentine's Day, and again, we heard from the Gateway presenters, and as you saw this evening, they were also impressed with the thoroughness and the research and work that that committee had put together for their students. Any further committee reports? Seeing none, at this time we will open to public comments on agenda items. We do have a few people in the audience. Any takers? No? Okay. Seeing none, we'll close public participation. At this time, we will sign the manifest. Could I have a motion to go into non-public session per RSA 91-A:3, Roman numeral A, sections A, B, and C? Made by Jennifer, second by George. George, how do you vote? In favor. Jennifer? In favor. Jody? In favor. Rose? In favor. And the chair votes in favor. We will take a 5-minute recess to clear the room.